Chapter 16 New Female Teacher, Tong Yue. Will your husband be okay seeing as how he went into the mountains? Mo Fan asked. Who would have known that there'd be light-colored warnings outside of the city? It indicates that the residents shouldn't carelessly wander deep into the mountains. He kept saying that the hunter squad lost some supplies while they were following the tracks of a one-eyed magical wolf and that he had to personally deliver it. He's just a logistics employee, yet he even has the guts to do this kind of life-threatening work. Your dad, no matter what I told him, still wouldn't listen. Mo Qing answered. My dad went as well? Mo Fan's face immediately changed. Yeah, they said it would pay a lot. Even mage apprentices are too afraid to receive their call, yet, these two normal people. If nothing happens, then that's fine. However, if something really were to happen, what'll happen to us? Mo Qing said, Auntie, don't worry, they must have considered this already. There won't be any problems. They're just delivering it to a designated outpost, and the roads from the city to the outpost are still within the safe zone, Yi Xinxia said from the side. Either way, I just wish the two would just obediently do their job within the city. I get worried when they leave the city, Mo Qing whispered once again. After hearing Mo Qing's complaints, Mo Fan began to have a bad feeling. Father hasn't come to my school to see me for the past 6 months. It turns out he picked a different road. He went to deliver goods to the hunter magicians patrolling outside. This job is indeed very dangerous compared to his former job where he'd only deliver goods to wealthy people. Although it's winter break, Mo Fan wasn't free at all. After staying at Auntie's place for a few days, Mo Fan returned to Tianlan Magic High's library. The library had the information he needed to replenish, for example, the Black Church which he missed out on. Mo Fan understood what kind of thing the Black Church was after reading about it. Those guys are similar to terror organizations, a large, evil cult. They frequently did things that would harm the safety of the people. Additionally, for the sake of their own goals, they would even use living people as cultivation material. The country was not lenient on insane things like that, naturally. In the coming month, Mo Fan wholeheartedly meditated. After knowing the lightning element's stardust would dry up and turn completely dark after only using lightning strike twice, Mo Fan began to understand the importance of meditation. Thus, this entire month, despite how great the temptation of activating fire element's skill, Fire Burst, Mo Fan didn't rashly try to come in contact with fire element's star. He must solidify his foundation first. As he was engrossed in meditation and treated all of this as a habit, the time passed very quickly. Soon enough, it became the start of the school again. Inside the library, Mo Fan swept off the cobwebs that covered his body, ready to meet the new magic school term. In high spirits, Mo Fan walked into the classroom and sat down in a seat at the very back, just like always. There's something wrong today. Mo Fan looked at Zhang Xiaohou next to him and discovered this lad didn't look all right. Normally, this guy's expression would be just like a curious little monkey, a clever one. Moreover, he would incessantly tell Mo Fan about his past few days during class. Today, however, his eyes looked dull, his mouth was slightly open, and his face was filled with an unfathomable, intoxicated gaze as he looked toward the front. As he looked around his surroundings, the two study Rex, Xu Qinglin and Lu Xiaobing, were showing the same expression. It was as though they were being possessed. Sheet, don't tell me what Auntie said really is true. There is a one-eyed magical wolf within the city and these lads have all been infected by it. Good morning, class. The teacher for your practical magic class has fallen ill and is currently at home recuperating. From today on, I will be in charge of everyone's practical magic classes. My name is Tong Yue. A mature, beautiful, and bright sound resounded. After being accustomed to the hoarse and slow voice of an old man, the sudden appearance of a mature woman's voice with a charming and sexy tune swept past like the spring wind brushing the grounds. This caused the slightly tired Mo Fan to immediately wake up. He raised his head as he searched for the origins of the voice with expectation. Mo Fan's eyes were starstruck and his expression appeared enchanted. What the hell? Who cares about the evil-eyed marsh monster that can confuse people's hearts? It's evident that the souls of the males with exuberant hormones were attracted by this newly arrived, extraordinarily beautiful female teacher. This teacher, Tong Yue, wore a standard, black suit. In between the outer black suit and the white shirt on the inside were bulging, majestic, and glamorous mountain peaks that were about to burst. This made Mo Fan wonder whether the little buttons on the chest were really capable of holding up this turbulent wave. Annoying, this really is annoying. The early morning has always been the time where the young men are at their most violent. As they were stimulated like this, I reckon the majority will have a rather shameful appearance. It's been half a year since you awakened, and there's not a single person who has been able to use their magic. However, I hope you understand that being able to control an immense power does not signify that you know how to use it. If you don't properly control your powers, then they'll backfire on you. Mrs. Tong Yue quickly entered her teaching state. Originally, the teacher's earnest and solemn attitude caused many little tyrants to come back to their senses. Who would have known that the second she turned around after writing some important segments on the blackboard, the entire class would get nosebleeds? What a disaster! Bulging and round, Mo Fan was definitely a normal male student. At this moment, the exact same scene came to his head. Ahem, how could one let one's imagination run wild in a sacred school? Either way, Mo Fan wholeheartedly wanted to study. Mo Fan was definitely not the same as this group of people who only thought with their lower body. In any case, I definitely won't wear tight pants to the practical magic classes again. Not every organism is capable of being like a climbing tiger. Move around the obstacle and continue what they're doing. The practical magic classes went on for the entire morning. After finishing theory, Tong Yue brought everyone to the field, personally showing everyone the essential keys to magic activation. Mo Fan also earnestly listened to this class. For example, what Mrs. Tong Yue had said concerning the magic activation link, Mo Fan had already experienced it. It's just, he didn't understand how the buttons on the front of Mrs. Tong Yue's chest were so durable. It's been so long yet they still hadn't burst? Naturally, the school field isn't supposed to be used for radio calisthenics. The field was actually just the practice grounds. They had been divided into several independent spaces using a magic barrier which Mo Fan didn't understand. All the overflowing power would be absorbed by the transparent barrier. This was to prevent harming the students who didn't have any kind of ability. Look closely. I will demonstrate the primary skill of fire element, fire burst. Tong Yue stood in the middle of the students. The students assembled into a half arc, scattered behind Mrs. Tong Yue. Whether everyone really was watching Mrs. Tong Yue's hand seals was something that no one was sure of. Fire burst, it's the skill of fire element. Brother Mo Fan, wipe your saliva, it's your element's skill. Never did I think that Mrs. Tong Yue, who looks so tender and virtuous, would actually be a fire mage. Zhang Xiaohou nudged the Mo Fan beside him. Oh, I want to learn this. Only then did Mo Fan come back to his senses. Chapter 17 The Beautiful Female Teacher's Fire Element. Currently, Tong Yue maintained an extremely straight posture as she calmly stood there. Her elegant, curvy physique outlined the slightly tight skirt which people felt was particularly moving. Perhaps it was because she was new to teaching, that was why her selection of clothing seemed a bit too hasty, resulting in this. This really gave the students a feast for their eyes. You have to meditate, be tranquil, and concentrate. Even if I am speaking to you right now, my mentality is wholeheartedly concentrated on the fire element nebula within me. Oh, I mean stardust. Mrs. Tong Yue said. Mrs. Tong Yue's voice was transmitted to every student's ears. When everyone thought Mrs. Tong Yue was standing still as a statue, a sudden fluctuation could be seen from her pear blossom hair. There was not a single thread of wind in the field, however, her hair looked as though she was on a steamer, causing it to scatter around. Control. At this moment, you need to call out so your star can obey your commands and open the doors of the fire element magic. Mrs. Tong Yue's tone changed from its usual softness to a solemn one. It carried a hint of an arrogance which stated that everything should burn down before her. In this instant, all the males, with their heads filled with dirty thoughts, immediately became dumbstruck. Their eyes widened as they looked at this beautiful female teacher with shock. Aura. That's right. They felt a scorching aura emitting from Mrs. Tong Yue's body, swelling over everyone's faces. There was shock, reverence, and a certain intimidating presence that prevented people from having any form of wicked thoughts. Everyone initially thought the newly arrived Mrs. Tong Yue would be your average teacher, be able to give everyone a messy theory lesson just like the old guy before her. When it came to them being able to personally activate magic, there might even be a mistake in what she taught. However, the young Tong Yue in front of them seemed to have been able to control this power for a very, very long time. She was able to teach while she controlled the star. After she finished her magic incantations, the emerging fire's intensity was on a completely different level compared to the old man. It was like comparing a small fire to a pillar of flames. Remember, after you've finished the arrangement of the stars, you can't relax your thoughts. You must immediately focus on the position of your activation. That dignified voice resounded once more. Searing flames. The sound was like a magical bell, ringing inside everyone's mind. While at the same time, a dazzling scarlet-red star path emerged around Mrs. Tongyu's body before it quickly condensed within her jade-like right hand. Following this, a fiery red power rapidly grew on her half-gripped hands. It was incomparably violent. With all of her might, she used her arm to throw it. The flame shot out like an arrow and gave off a scarlet-red delicacy. After that, it became like a bullet, accurately and unmistakably penetrating the body of the puppet. Gone? How come nothing happened? It hit the target though. The atmosphere grew silent for a period of time. The puppet which was hit by fire burst didn't have any kind of reaction, while Mrs. Tongyu's aura was the complete opposite. Within the confusion, Mrs. Tongyue slowly turned around and faced the entire 48 students of the class with her somewhat young and tender face. However, the corner of her mouth gave off a smirking smile that displayed her high self-confidence. Suddenly, a shocking scarlet red burst forth from within the puppet. It absolutely was not one of those slow ignitions, it was a violent flutter. It looked like something that was able to burn everything in one breath. The intact human-like puppet from just now was engulfed by a scarlet red flame in just an instant. Was it 1 second or two? The fire everyone knew of usually fluttered about. However, this flame was hungry like a wild beast swallowing food. It hadn't even been 2 seconds before the entire human-shaped puppet was completely engulfed into nothingness. The gaudy scarlet light reflected in Mrs. Tongyu's beautiful pear blossom hair. Her fair-skinned face was increasingly captivating at the moment. The smile from the corner of her mouth, along with the reckless fire behind her back, enhanced the already stunningly beautiful teacher. There was one way to describe this appearance: unrealistically beautiful. All 48 students of the class were completely starstruck. Mo Fan didn't know how other people felt about this, but he felt his own heart throbbing. Not only because this teacher was beautiful and charming, but when she wore the power of the flames, her body exuded a grandeur confidence. His own blood rose, accompanied by worship, infatuation, and reverence. If a woman is only beautiful, she'll cause men to have a wild imagination. However, this woman had grasped the authority and power which other people were unable to touch upon. This woman was like poison. Men were just unable to free themselves from her. Only the heavens knew how many guys have set Mrs. Tongyue as their goddess for life after seeing this scene. Even Mo Fan was completely subdued by her temperament. Although they were both teachers in practical magic, the old man's magic activation was lifeless. It caused the people watching to feel drowsy. Mrs. Tongyu's activation caused people to engrave it onto their hearts, making them feel excited and unable to calm themselves. They were on completely different levels. Alright, who are the fire element students in our class? Let me note them down. Mrs. Tongyue seemed to regard the gazes of worship from students as something normal as she continued to teach her class. I'm a fire element user. A girl whose face carried a heroic spirit took the initiative and stood up. She was Joman, who gave rise to small disturbances during the opening ceremony. Joman's eyes were constantly fixated on Mrs. Tongyue. In fact, Joman didn't like her in the beginning. How could there be a teacher who would wear clothes that attracted this much attention and possessed a voice so gentle and beautiful? However, after seeing Mrs. Tongyue finish a flame burst, Joman's heart did a complete 180, and her heart gave birth to a sense of worship. Joman's mother was also a teacher. However, she was sure that her own mother was unable to do the same thing as Mrs. Tongyue. Whether it was the aura, intensity, accuracy, or the power. I am one too, Mrs. Tongyue. I am also a fire element user. My name is Huang Feifeng. The other male student who had awakened the fire element jumped out. Look at this Huang Feifeng's excited expression. Who didn't know that if the practical magic teacher had the same element as you, then it'd be like having a small stove, with the master passing useful things on to their disciples? Huang Feifeng felt extremely lucky. He had unexpectedly become Mrs. Tongyue's disciple. Who could say if Mrs. Tongyue would appreciate his talent in the future and give birth to feelings toward him? She was his own little dragon maiden. Don't stand in my way. I'm going to the roof. Why didn't I awaken the fire element? Why? Lu Xiaobing, who awakened the water element, was making loud noises as he cried. Teacher, I am also a fire element user. My name is Zhao Deniu. A little man who stuttered stood up. As his eyes met Mrs. Tongyu's, his face turned completely red. Mo Fan sighed. You could tell with one glance that it was just an average beansprout that no one cared for. As Mrs. Tongyue looked at this little man, she chuckled as she said, "You're clearly very thin and weak. Why did your family name you Big Cow?" My body is weak. Father and mother wished for me to become sturdy, like a big cow. Then you should be named Zhao Blabbermouth. Zhao Kunsen and his clever mouth immediately mocked. What Zhao Kunsen was mocking was naturally Zhao Dania's stutter. Are there more? Mrs. Tangyu's gaze swept over. There's only 3 fire element users in a single class? That's too little. Judging by their aura, it seemed like there was only the girl called Zuo Zhouman whose talent was slightly better, and her cultivation pace was also not bad. There's also me. My name is Mo Fan. Mo Fan came back to his senses and walked out from the crowd of people.